The stars have always been patient teachers. They do not hurry. They do not explain themselves. They simply burn across distances so vast that the light reaching your eyes tonight may have begun its journey before your civilization learned to name the dark. I have lived long enough to understand this now, that the universe does not measure worth in years or power or the territories one claims. It measures worth in what remains when everything else has been taken away.
My name is Virath Solindrath, and I am the last High Chronicler of the Kasari Dominion. I have witnessed the rise and fall of 17 spacefaring species. I have documented wars that consumed entire star clusters and peace treaties that lasted for 10,000 years. I have seen civilizations ascend to godhood and others crumble into dust.
But I had never seen anything like humanity until the day my people came to them begging for salvation, and in our arrogance did not realize we were addressing something far older than our pride could comprehend.
I am writing this account because someone must, because the truth of what happened deserves to exist in more than memory. Because the Vorath believed they understood terror, and they were wrong, and the galaxy should know why.
Let me begin where all endings truly start, at the moment we first realized we were dying. The Kasari Dominion had endured for 11,000 years. We had mapped the spiral arms before humanity's ancestors climbed down from trees. We had developed fold space travel when Earth was still cooling from the fires of its formation. Our fleets numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Our worlds numbered in the hundreds. Our population exceeded 40 billion sentient beings, each one educated in the arts of diplomacy, science, philosophy, and war. We thought ourselves eternal. The Voreth taught us otherwise. They emerged from the outer reaches, a sector of space we had deemed uninhabitable, too far from stable stars, too scarred by ancient supernovae. We had been wrong. The Voreth had evolved there, hardened by radiation and scarcity into something patient and utterly without mercy. They did not conquer. They did not negotiate. They consumed. The first Kasari world fell in 6 hours. Veltharion Prime, a cultural center of 800 million souls. We received no warning, no demands, only silence where a planet had been. And then the recordings they sent us afterward, recordings of our people dying, broadcast on every frequency we could receive, playing on an endless loop as if death itself were entertainment. That was their method. That was their message. You will watch your end coming, and you will know there is nothing you can do. 17 worlds fell in the first year. The Voreth fleet was not larger than ours, it was simply better. Their weapons cut through our shields as if they were atmosphere. Their armor shrugged off our most devastating attacks. And always, always they recorded. They broadcast every death, every burning city, every child screaming for parents who would never come. They wanted us to feel it. They wanted the watching to break us before their ships ever arrived. By the 3rd year, we had lost 140 worlds. Our fleet had been reduced to a fraction of its former strength. Refugee ships clogged the transit lanes, desperate masses fleeing toward the core systems, hoping that proximity to our seat of power might offer some protection. It did not. The Voreth took their time. They savored our collapse. And through it all, they broadcast every moment to the galaxy at large. A warning, a promise,
a demonstration of what happened to species that existed in space they wanted. It was in the 4th year, when we had lost 208 worlds and over 19 billion of our people, that the High Council made a decision that would have been unthinkable in our years of strength.
We would ask the humans for help. You must understand what this meant to us. Humanity was a species we had observed for barely 3 centuries, a blink of an eye by our reckoning. They had achieved faster-than-light travel only 200 years before, an accomplishment we had reached 8,000 years earlier. Their territory was laughably small, a single arm of the galaxy, perhaps 40 systems, with Earth at its center, like a heart too stubborn to stop beating.
We had studied them, as we studied all emerging species. We had noted their violence, their tribalism, their seemingly endless capacity for self-destruction. They had fought 2 global wars in a single century. They had poisoned their own atmosphere, depleted their own resources, and come within moments of annihilating themselves with nuclear fire on multiple occasions.
They were, by every metric we valued, primitives. Dangerous primitives, perhaps, but primitives nonetheless.
The High Council sent me because I had experience with younger species, because I could speak with patience and hide my condescension, because they believed I could convince these humans to offer whatever meager assistance they could provide, perhaps a few ships, perhaps some resources, perhaps simply a safe corridor through their space for our refugees.
We expected nothing of significance. We were desperate enough to ask anyway.
I remember the journey to their space. I remember how small their border stations appeared on our sensors, functional structures of metal and composite, lacking the elegant geometries of Kasari architecture. Their patrol vessels were blocky, utilitarian things, more like armed cargo haulers than proper warships. When they hailed us, their communication protocols were straightforward to the point of being crude. And yet, there was something in the way their ships moved, something in the efficiency of their formations. They did not waste motion. They did not posture or display. They simply existed in their positions with a kind of quiet certainty that I found oddly unsettling. A human voice came through our communications array. Female, calm, with an accent I would later learn was called British.
Kasari vessel, this is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Station Artemis. We've been expecting you. You're cleared for approach to Docking Bay 7. Please follow the beacon and maintain your current velocity.
Expecting us. The words lingered in my mind as my pilot followed their beacon. We had sent no advance warning. Our departure had been kept secret even from most of our own government. How had they known? Artemis Station was larger than I had anticipated, a vast wheel of metal spinning slowly against the stars, its surface dotted with sensor arrays and weapon emplacements that my tactical officer quietly noted were more numerous than they appeared. The docking bay swallowed our diplomatic shuttle with room to spare, and when the atmosphere had cycled and the doors opened, I stepped out to meet humanity for the first time.
Commander Chen was waiting. She was smaller than I had expected. Humans are a generally compact species, with black hair pulled back from a face that seemed younger than her rank suggested. Her uniform was dark, practical, unadorned except for a simple insignia over her heart, a blue circle with a single white star at its center. She smiled when she saw me. It was not a smile of mockery or triumph. It was the smile of someone who has been waiting patiently and is pleased that the waiting is over. "Hi, Chronicler Vareth," she said, pronouncing my name with surprising accuracy. "Welcome to Artemis Station. I imagine you've had a long journey."
I inclined my head in the Kasari gesture of formal greeting. You know my name, you know my title, and you claim to have been expecting me. I confess, Commander, that I am uncertain how to interpret this. Her smile did not waver. We pay attention, High Chronicler. It's something of a habit. Your government has been deliberating for several weeks about whether to approach us. We've been preparing a welcome since the vote passed 3 days ago. I felt something cold move through my chest. We had believed our communications secure. We had believed our deliberations private. The implications of her words were profound and troubling.
I see, I said carefully. And what else do you pay attention to?
Commander Chen's expression shifted slightly. The smile remained, but something deeper moved behind her eyes, something that might have been sadness or anger or both.
"We've been watching the Vorith broadcasts," she said quietly. "All of them, every world, every death. We have people whose only job is to watch, to document, to remember."
She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was very soft.
"We remember everything, High Chronicler. It's another habit we can't seem to break."
I did not know what to say. In that moment, standing in that utilitarian docking bay with this small, calm woman, I felt the first stirring of something I could not name. It was not hope. I had abandoned hope many worlds ago. It was something stranger, something that felt almost like recognition. She led me through the station. I observed everything, as is my nature. The corridors were clean, well maintained, but utterly without ornamentation. The humans we passed nodded respectfully, but did not stare. They moved with purpose, each one apparently engaged in some task I could not discern. There was no idle conversation, no wasted motion. And everywhere I noticed small things. A woman with mechanical legs that moved with perfect fluidity. A man whose eyes were clearly artificial, gleaming with subtle electronics. Scars visible on skin that was not hidden. Scars from burns, from blades, from injuries I could not identify. These humans bore the marks of violence on their bodies and did not seem to consider them shameful.
"Your people," I said as we walked. "They are modified, augmented."
Commander Chen nodded. Some of them, the ones who needed to be. We're practical about bodies, High Chronicler. They're tools. When tools break, you fix them. When they're not sufficient for the task, you improve them.
"And the scars?" She glanced back at me. "We don't hide what we've survived. It would feel dishonest."
We reached a conference room, simple, functional, with a long table and chairs designed to accommodate multiple species. 2 other humans were already present, a man with gray at his temples and the bearing of a soldier, and a younger woman with dark skin and the intense focus of someone who lived inside her own mind.
"High Chronicler Varath," Commander Chen said. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb, Commanding Officer of Earth's Third Fleet, and Dr. Amara Okonkwo, our leading xenostrategic analyst."
I studied them. The Admiral met my gaze with steady, unreadable eyes. The doctor was already examining me with undisguised curiosity. "Please," the Admiral said, gesturing to a chair. "Sit. You've come a long way, and I suspect you have a great deal to tell us."
I sat. For a moment, I struggled with where to begin. For so long, my people had been the ones offering wisdom, guidance, occasionally judgment to younger species. To sit before these humans as a supplicant, to ask them for something, went against every instinct I possessed.
But pride is a luxury, and my people could no longer afford it.
You have seen the broadcasts, I said. You know what the Vorith are doing to us. In 4 years, they have destroyed over 200 of our worlds. 19 billion Kasari are dead. Our fleets have been shattered. Our government is in chaos.
I paused, gathering myself.
We are dying, Admiral. I have come to ask if you will help us. The 3 humans exchanged glances. There was something in their expressions I could not read, a shared understanding that seemed to pass between them without words. It was Dr. Okonkwo who spoke first. High Chronicler, may I ask you a question?
I nodded.
In all your years of observing humanity, did you ever study our history? Not just our recent centuries, but our full history, what we were before we reached the stars. The question surprised me. We studied enough to make assessments. Your violence, your tribalism, your wars.
And those assessments led you to dismiss us.
I hesitated. We recognized that you were a species with potential, but you were young, undeveloped. We assumed you would either mature or destroy yourselves, as many species do. Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward slightly. You watched us fight 2 world wars in a single century. You watched us nearly end ourselves with nuclear weapons. You saw our violence and you thought, these are primitives, these are children. They will either grow up or they will die. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. She was correct. High Chronicler, she continued, do you know what actually happened in those wars? Not the politics or the outcomes, but what individual humans experienced.
I know. The details were not considered relevant to our assessments.
She nodded slowly. In our First World War, young men, boys really, stood in trenches filled with mud and corpses for years. They watched their friends die from disease, from gas, from artillery fire that never stopped, and they kept fighting. In our Second World War, entire cities were burned. Millions were systematically murdered for the crime of existing, and we kept fighting. We have a saying, High Chronicler, that which does not kill us makes us stronger. It is not a boast.
It is a warning.
Admiral Webb spoke then, his voice quiet but carrying easily across the room. You looked at our history and saw violence. You saw chaos. What you should have seen was something else entirely.
And what is that? I asked.
He met my eyes. Endurance. The word hung in the air between us. I thought of my people, the Kasari, who had known 11,000 years of relative peace, who had forgotten what it meant to truly struggle, who had built our civilization on the assumption that strength came from age and wisdom and the accumulation of power. And I thought of these humans who had spent their entire existence clawing their way up from violence and hardship, who had nearly killed themselves a dozen times over and had somehow, impossibly, survived. You are saying, I said slowly, that your suffering has made you what? Harder? More resilient? We're saying, Commander Chen said, that we understand what you're going through in a way that a species with 11,000 years of comfort cannot. We know what it means to watch your world burn and to keep fighting anyway. We know what it means to lose everything and to rebuild from ashes. She leaned forward, and for the first time, I saw something fierce in her eyes.
And we know what it means to be underestimated.
There was silence in the room. I found myself reassessing everything I thought I knew about these humans. The calm, the efficiency, the scars they wore openly. It was not primitiveness. It was the quiet confidence of a species that had already survived its own extinction multiple times and expected to do so again.
"You will help us, then?" I asked.
Admiral Webb glanced at his colleagues, then back at me. "High Chronicler, before we discuss that, there's something you need to understand. You came here believing you were asking a lesser species for minor assistance, a few ships perhaps, some resources, a trade of desperation."
I started to protest, but he raised a hand gently.
"It's all right. We're used to being underestimated. It's actually quite useful." His expression darkened. "But I need you to understand something about humanity before we proceed. We have been watching the Vorith broadcasts, as Sarah told you, every single one. We have analysts who do nothing but study them. We have memorial services for each world that falls, where we read the names of Kasari cities that no longer exist." I stared at him. "Why? They are not your people. We are not your allies. Why would you mourn our dead?"
Dr. Okonkwo answered. "Because someone has to, High Chronicler. Because death deserves witness. Because if no one remembers, it's as if they never existed at all. We learned that lesson the hard way, a long time ago."
I felt something tighten in my chest, an emotion I had suppressed for years under the weight of loss after loss. "I do not understand you," I admitted. "I have studied species my entire life, and I do not understand you."
Commander Chen smiled, but there was no mockery in it, only something that might have been sympathy.
"We're not complicated, High Chronicler. We're just stubborn. And we have very, very long memories." She stood and walked to a wall panel. With a gesture, she activated a display screen that flickered to life with images I recognized. Vorith broadcasts. The death of Kasari worlds. My people burning, fleeing, dying. "The Vorith broadcast these as propaganda," she said. "They want to break the will of their enemies. They want to spread fear. They want everyone to know that resistance is futile." The images changed. Now I was seeing something different. Vorith ships attacking human vessels, human stations burning, human bodies floating in the void of space. My hearts, I have too, seemed to stop. "They've attacked you," I whispered. "They've already attacked you." 18 months ago, Admiral Webb confirmed. A border incursion. 3 of our outer stations. 8,000 dead. They broadcast every death, just as they do with your people. But we saw nothing. There was no response, no retaliation, we assumed.
"You assumed we were too weak to respond," the Admiral said. "Or too frightened, or perhaps too primitive to understand what had happened." I nodded, unable to speak. "We let you assume that, High Chronicler. We let the Vorith assume it too."
He stood and walked to the display, changing the images again. Now I was seeing something else entirely. Shipyards. Vast, sprawling complexes that seemed to go on forever. Ships being constructed, weapons being manufactured, troops training in massive facilities that covered entire moons.
"For 18 months," he said quietly, "we have been preparing. Every factory on every world, every shipyard in every system, every man and woman of fighting age. We have been building, training, planning." The images continued. Ships, thousands of them, tens of thousands, more ships than I had ever seen assembled in one place. They were not elegant. They were brutal, functional things, bristling with weapons I could not identify. "How?" I breathed. "How is this possible? You have 40 systems, we have hundreds, and our fleet was—" "Your fleet was built over millennia," Dr. Okonkwo interrupted gently. "During peacetime,
with careful consideration and bureaucratic oversight. Ours was built in 18 months by a species that has spent its entire existence learning how to mobilize for war on short notice.
She brought up new data, production statistics, resource allocations, manufacturing outputs that made no sense by any metric I understood. When humanity decides to fight, she continued, we don't do it halfway. We don't hold back reserves or worry about economic sustainability or plan for a graceful return to peacetime. We convert everything, every resource, every industry, every moment of every day toward a single goal. We call it total war. We invented it, and we are very, very good at it. I stared at the displays, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. The numbers were impossible. The scale was impossible. In 18 months, this species of primitives had built a war machine that dwarfed anything the Kasari Dominion had fielded at its height. You were never weak, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. You were never primitive. You were just waiting. We were hoping, Commander Chen said softly, that we wouldn't have to do this, hoping that someone else would stop the Vorith, hoping that the galaxy might solve its own problems without us getting involved. She shook her head. But hope is not a strategy, and the Vorith made their intentions clear. They don't just want territory, they want to watch the galaxy burn. What are you going to do? I asked. Admiral Webb turned to face me. His expression was calm, but something terrible moved behind his eyes, something old and patient and utterly without mercy. High Chronicler, the Vorith broadcast human deaths to break our spirit. They wanted us to see our people dying in despair. They wanted us to know that we were next. He paused. They have been broadcasting for 18 months. Every death, every station, every body. And we have been watching, recording, remembering. His voice dropped, and when he spoke again, it carried the weight of something inevitable. Now it's our turn to broadcast. The displays changed again. I saw fleet deployments, invasion routes, tactical projections. I saw a plan of such scope and precision that it took my breath away. Every Vorith world, every Vorith fleet position, every supply line and communication hub and population center, all of it mapped, all of it targeted. In 7 days, the Admiral said, the United Earth Response Fleet will launch the largest military operation in human history. We will strike every Vorith-held system simultaneously. We will give no warning. We will offer no terms. And we will broadcast every moment of it on every frequency the galaxy can receive. I felt my hands trembling. This is extermination. You're talking about destroying an entire species. Yes, he said simply. We are. But I struggled to find words. The moral implications, the ethics of... You cannot simply... Dr. Okonkwo spoke, and her voice was gentle but unyielding. High Chronicler, we spent a very long time debating those questions. We argued about proportional response. We considered diplomatic options. We discussed the difference between justice and vengeance. She met my gaze. And then we watched another broadcast. Another Kasari city burning. Another million beings dying for the entertainment of monsters. And we realized something. What? I whispered. That the Vorith will never stop. They cannot be negotiated with. They cannot be contained. They exist to consume, and they will keep consuming until there is nothing left. Her voice hardened.
Some problems don't have elegant solutions, High Chronicler. Some enemies can only be destroyed.
I sat in silence for a long time. Everything I had believed about these humans, everything my people had believed, was crumbling around me. We had thought them primitive. We had thought them crude. We had thought their violence made them lesser.
We had been fools.
"Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked. "Why show me your plans?"
Commander Chen sat down across from me, her expression softening. "Because when this is over, someone will need to tell the story. Someone will need to explain why humanity did what it did. Someone will need to help the galaxy understand."
She reached across the table and, to my shock, took my hand. Her skin was warm, her grip gentle but firm.
We're not doing this because we want to, High Chronicler. We're not doing it for conquest or resources or glory. We're doing it because it has to be done, and because we're the only ones who can do it.
I looked into her eyes and saw something I had not expected to find there. Sorrow. Deep, profound sorrow for what was about to happen, for what her species was about to become.
"You don't enjoy this," I said. "The violence, the destruction. It brings you no pleasure." "No," she said, "it doesn't. We're good at war, High Chronicler, very good. But being good at something doesn't mean you have to enjoy it."
Then why?
Because 8,000 of our people died screaming while the Vorith broadcast their deaths for entertainment. Because 19 billion of your people have suffered the same fate. Because if we don't stop them, they will keep doing this until the galaxy is empty.
She squeezed my hand. And because nobody else can.
The next 7 days were a blur of activity. I was given quarters on Artemis Station, comfortable by human standards, luxurious by military ones. I was allowed to observe, to question, to record. The humans seemed almost eager to have a witness, someone outside their species who could document what they were about to do. I spent most of that time simply watching them prepare. And the more I watched, the more unsettled I became.
There was no celebration, no martial enthusiasm, no eager anticipation of glory. The humans went about their preparations with the grim efficiency of surgeons preparing for a dangerous operation. They checked their weapons, reviewed their tactics, said goodbye to loved ones through recorded messages that might never be sent. And everywhere, I heard them talking about the ones they had lost.
Names, stories, memories. Every crew member who had died in those first Vorith attacks was spoken of as if they were still present. Their favorite foods, their quirks, the way they laughed, the dreams they had held.
The humans remembered everything, and they intended to make the Vorith remember too.
On the 6th day, I witnessed something that haunted me more than any battle could. I was walking through a residential section of the station when I heard singing, a lone voice accompanied by a simple stringed instrument. I followed the sound to a small common area where a young woman, perhaps 20 Earth years old, was playing for a small audience.
The song was sad, slow, haunting. It spoke of loss and love and the terrible things that war demands. The humans listening were silent, some with tears on their faces. These were soldiers, warriors about to embark on a campaign of annihilation, and they sat there, weeping over a song. When the song ended, no one applauded. They simply sat in silence for a long moment, and then, one by one, they stood and returned to their duties. One of them noticed me watching. He was older, his face weathered by time, and I suspected by other wars.
First time seeing humans grieve? He asked.
Yes, I admitted. I did not expect warriors to be so emotional.
He nodded slowly. That's the thing most species don't understand about us, chronicler. They see our violence and they think we don't feel. They see our wars and they think we enjoy killing. He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. We feel everything, every death, every loss, every terrible thing we're forced to do. We just don't let it stop us.
How do you bear it? I asked. The weight of so much death.
He was quiet for a moment. Then, we bear it because someone has to. We bear it so others don't have to. That's what being human is, chronicler. Carrying weights that would crush anyone else and finding a way to keep walking.
He left me standing there, thinking about everything I had believed about these people, about everything the galaxy believed. We were all so wrong.
On the 7th day, I stood on the observation deck of Artemis Station and watched the fleet depart.
Words cannot adequately describe what I saw. The human language has a term, armada, that originated from their naval history. It seemed wholly inadequate for what passed before my eyes. Ships beyond counting, carriers that dwarfed any vessel the Kasari had ever built, cruisers bristling with weapons, destroyers moving in formations so precise they seemed to dance, and everywhere the emblems of Earth, that simple blue circle with its white star, repeated across hull after hull after hull.
They had hidden this. For 18 months, they had let the galaxy believe they were weak, frightened, insignificant. They had let the Vorith believe their attacks had gone unanswered because humanity could not answer.
And all that time, they had been building this.
Commander Chen stood beside me, her face illuminated by the running lights of departing vessels.
18 million personnel, she said quietly. 42,000 ships. Every weapon we've ever developed, every strategy we've ever conceived.
This is your entire military force, I said. You're leaving nothing in reserve.
We don't do things halfway, High Chronicler.
But if you fail,
we won't fail.
The certainty in her voice was absolute, not arrogance. I had heard arrogance from 1,000 species, and this was not it. This was something else. Confidence born of preparation. Faith forged in the fires of a history that had tried to destroy them 100 times and failed. How can you be so sure?
She turned to look at me, and in her eyes I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was not hatred. It was not rage. It was the calm, implacable determination of a species that had decided something needed to die and was simply going to make it happen.
Because we're not fighting for territory, High Chronicler. We're not fighting for resources or pride or any of the things that usually drive wars. We're fighting because we watched monsters murder billions of innocent beings for entertainment, and we decided that those monsters needed to stop existing. She looked back at the departing fleet. There's nothing more dangerous in this galaxy than a human who's decided something needs to be done, and 8 billion of us have decided. The fleet vanished into fold space, ship after ship blinking out of existence as they made the jump toward Vorith territory. Within hours, the first reports began coming back.
And the broadcasts began.
The humans had promised to broadcast everything, and they kept their word. Every frequency, every wavelength, every communication channel the galaxy could receive, all of them suddenly carried the same feed.
The destruction of the Vorith.
The first world to fall was Kethvalar, a military staging ground on the outer edge of Vorith space. The human fleet emerged from fold space already firing. There was no warning, no ultimatum, no demand for surrender. One moment, the Vorith defense stations were tracking empty space, and the next, they were debris. The planet's surface defenses lasted slightly longer, perhaps 40 minutes. Then the orbital bombardment began, and there was nothing left to defend.
I watched it happen. I watched, and I could not look away. The humans were efficient, brutally, terrifyingly efficient. Their weapons cut through Vorith's shielding like it wasn't there. Their tactics anticipated every defense, every counterattack, every desperate maneuver. They had studied the Vorith broadcasts with the same intensity the Vorith had used to terrify their enemies, but they had learned different lessons.
They had learned how the Vorith fought, how they thought, how they reacted, and they had built their entire campaign around exploiting those patterns. 17 Vorith worlds fell in the first day.
43 by the end of the second.
By the 5th day, the Vorith had lost their primary shipyards, their central command structure, and over half their military assets. They tried to regroup. They tried to mount a defense. They tried to negotiate.
The humans did not respond to any communication. They did not slow down. They did not offer terms.
They simply advanced, and everything in their path ceased to exist. On the 8th day, I received a transmission from my own government. The High Council, what remained of it, had been watching the broadcasts along with every other species in the galaxy. Their message was short and expressed something I had never heard from Kasari leadership: fear.
Not fear of the Vorith. That threat was clearly ending.
Fear of the humans. "What have we done?" the message read. "What have we awakened?" I had no answer. I was not sure there was one. The final battle, if it could be called a battle, took place above Vorith Prime, the homeworld of the species that had thought itself the terror of the galaxy. The Vorith had gathered every remaining ship, every reserve, every desperate resource they could muster. It was still the largest fleet they had ever assembled. It lasted 4 hours.
The humans did not surround them and demand surrender. They did not offer any opportunity for escape or negotiation. They simply attacked, and they did not stop attacking until there was nothing left to attack. I watched Vorith Prime burn. I watched orbital bombardments turn cities to glass. I watched a species that had existed for thousands of years, that had conquered dozens of worlds, that had believed itself invincible. I watched them die.
And the humans broadcast every second of it. When it was over, when the last Vorith ship had been destroyed, when the last Vorith city had stopped burning, when there was nothing left of them but debris and ash, the broadcasts stopped. The frequencies that had carried death to every corner of the galaxy fell silent. Admiral Webb appeared on screen one final time. He looked tired, not triumphant, not proud, just tired, like a man who had done something terrible because it needed to be done and was now carrying the weight of it. "This message is for every species receiving this broadcast," he said. "You have just witnessed the elimination of the Vorith Dominion. You have seen what humanity is capable of when we are forced to act." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was heavy with exhaustion and something that might have been grief.
We did not want this. We take no pleasure in it. But the Vorith gave us no choice. They broadcast death for entertainment. They murdered billions for sport. They made clear that they would never stop, that they could never be reasoned with, that they would continue
until every other species in the galaxy was dead or enslaved.
He looked directly into the camera, directly into the eyes of every being watching across 1,000 worlds. So we stopped them, permanently. And we broadcast every moment of it so that the galaxy would understand something very clearly.
His voice dropped, and the weariness in it gave way to something harder.
Humanity does not seek conquest. We do not want your worlds, or your resources, or your submission. We want to be left alone to build our own future among the stars. But we have very long memories, and we do not forgive those who harm the innocent.
He stood a little straighter. The Voreth broadcast human deaths for entertainment. This was Earth's reply. Let it be understood throughout the galaxy, we remember everything. We respond in kind, and there is no corner of space far enough to hide from us when we have decided to act.
The transmission ended. The silence that followed seemed to stretch across the entire galaxy.
I remained on Artemis Station for 3 more weeks after the war ended. I was there when the fleet returned, or what remained of it. They had lost over 8,000 ships and nearly 2 million personnel. Victory, it seemed, was not the same as invincibility.
But they had won. Completely. Absolutely. The Voreth were gone. Not defeated. Gone. A species that had terrorized the galaxy for generations had simply ceased to exist.
And humanity had done it in 12 days.
On my final evening before departing, Commander Chen invited me to dinner. We sat in a small officer's mess, eating simple food and drinking something the humans called wine that burned pleasantly on the way down.
"You're going to write about this," she said. It was not a question.
I am a chronicler. It is what I do.
And what will you write? I considered the question for a long time. I thought about everything I had witnessed, the preparation, the determination, the grief, the terrible, efficient violence, the way these humans had carried out an act of extinction and then come home to mourn both their own dead and the enemies they had destroyed.
I will write the truth, I said finally. I will write that humanity is not what we believed, that you are not primitives or savages or violent children playing with forces you do not understand.
I met her eyes.
I will write that you are perhaps the most frightening species the galaxy has ever produced, not because you are cruel, but because you are capable of anything, and you choose every day to be kind. That the same people who just annihilated an entire species are also the same people who wept over a sad song and held memorial services for my people's dead.
She was quiet for a moment. Is that frightening to you?
"Yes," I admitted, "but it is also, I do not know if there is a word in my language, something between awe and gratitude and terror." She smiled, that same smile she had worn when she first greeted me, patient and slightly sad.
We have a word for that, actually. We call it respect.
I thought about that word, about what it meant, about what it would mean for the galaxy to truly respect humanity, not as primitives to be pitied or threats to be contained, but as what they truly were.
There will be fear, I said, after what you did, after what everyone watched you do. There will be species that see you as the new threat, the new monsters.
I know.
It will take generations for the galaxy to trust you.
I know that too.
Does that bother you?
She took a long drink of wine before answering. High Chronicler, Humanity has never been trusted. Not by each other, not by anyone else. We're used to it. We'll do what we've always done. Prove ourselves through actions, not words. Show people who we really are, over and over, until they believe it.
And who are you, really? She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved.
We're survivors. We're adapters. We're the species that refused to die, no matter how many times the universe tried to kill us. We're the ones who look at impossible situations and say, "Fine, let's see what we can do." We're builders and dreamers, and yes, when we have to be, we're destroyers.
She leaned back in her chair, her eyes distant. But mostly, we're just people trying to find our place in a galaxy that's far older and stranger than we ever imagined. We don't want to rule it. We don't want to conquer it. We just want to belong to it. I nodded slowly. I believe you. After everything I have seen, I believe you. Will you help us? The question surprised me. Help you? How?
You're a chronicler. Your voice carries weight with other species. When you write about what happened here, you'll have a choice. You can portray us as monsters, or you can tell the more complicated truth. You can help the galaxy understand why we did what we did, and who we really are beneath the violence. I thought about my people, the Kasari, who had lost so much, who were only now beginning to emerge from the shadow of the Vorith. I thought about the 19 billion dead and the worlds that would never be rebuilt, and the generations of trauma that awaited the survivors.
And I thought about what would have happened if the humans had not acted. If the Vorith had continued their slow, methodical extermination until there were no Kasari left, until there was nothing left at all. I will tell the truth, I said again. All of it. The violence and the grief. The inefficiency and the sorrow. The terror you are capable of inspiring, and the kindness you showed me when I came begging for help. I raised my glass, awkwardly, imitating a human gesture I had observed. I will tell the galaxy that we underestimated you, that we mistook your youth for weakness and your suffering for inferiority. I will tell them that you are ancient in ways that have nothing to do with years, that a species forged in fire carries wisdom that comfortable can never understand. Commander Chen raised her own glass, her eyes shining with something that might have been tears. And I will tell them, I continued, that when the galaxy needed saving, it was the species we dismissed as primitive that answered the call. That it was humanity, young, violent, emotional, scarred, stubborn humanity, that did what 11,000 years of Kasari civilization could not. We drank together. The wine burned, but it was a good burning. The burning of something coming alive. One more thing, I said, as the evening drew to a close. A question I have wanted to ask since I first arrived.
Ask.
When you watched the Voreth broadcasts, when you saw my people dying, your people dying, what did you feel? She was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. We felt everything, High Chronicler. Every death, every scream, every child calling for parents who weren't coming. We felt all of it, and we remembered all of it, and we carried all of it. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the weight of everything she had witnessed, everything she had ordered, everything she had done. And then we went to work. I left human space the next day. As my shuttle pulled away from Artemis Station, I looked back at the structure that had seemed so unimpressive when I first arrived. It looked different now. Not grand, still, but purposeful, resolute, like the people who had built it. I thought about everything I would write, the chronicle that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of humanity, the truth that needed to be told. And I thought about the stars, patient teachers burning across distances too vast to comprehend. They had watched humanity's entire existence, the first steps, the first fires, the first wars, the first ventures into space. They had seen the violence and the beauty, the cruelty and the compassion, the endless capacity for both destruction and creation. The universe measures worth in what remains when everything else has been taken away. Humanity had been stripped of everything, over and over throughout their entire history. They had faced extinction a dozen times. They had watched their own kind slaughter each other in numbers too vast to comprehend. They had poisoned their world, depleted their resources, come within moments of ending themselves with their own weapons. And through it all, they had endured. They had survived. They had looked at the void and the violence and the death, and they had said, "Not today." The Vorath had broadcast human deaths and expected terror, expected submission, expected humanity to break as so many other species had broken. Instead, they had given humanity a reason to remember, and humanity never forgot. Earth's reply had ended a species, but more than that, it had sent a message to every civilization in the galaxy. A message written in fire and silence and the absolute certainty of a people who had survived everything the universe could throw at them. We are humanity. We endure. We remember. We protect. And if you make us your enemy, we will be the last enemy you ever face. I am Vereth Cylindrith, last High Chronicler of the Kasari Dominion. I have witnessed the rise and fall of 17 spacefaring species. I have documented wars that consumed entire star clusters. But I had never witnessed anything like humanity. And now, neither had the galaxy. May we learn from their example. May we carry the weight of our own survival with even a fraction of their grace. And may we never, ever give them a reason to remember us the way they remembered the Vorath. For the stars are patient teachers, and they have much still to show us. And somewhere, in a small corner of the galaxy, humanity watches, and waits, and remembers. Always.